Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to be talking about trimming, and it is everybody's fun favorite thing to do. Actually, no, everybody hates it, including myself, but it has to be done. Maybe not every single time. Just make sure after each batch or after each firing that you take some calipers and measure a few cases. If you're still within tolerance, you're good to go. So I want to mention at least a few different types of trimmers. There are other ways out there as well, including ones that you can chuck into your drill, which I do recommend, and I would show you, but I do not have one. But I'll go from the cheapest kind of to the most expensive. So we have the Lee, I think, case gauge and cutter. It's kind of a misleading name, but I guess this piece here, this little small piece, kind of acts like a case gauge in a way. So somehow, but they're caliber specific. I think they're around $6 or so for each caliber, and you get the shell holder for it. And these shell holders are not, you cannot use your traditional standard shell holder that you use in a press. It comes with ones. You have to use these. These are specially made and threaded, and it also comes with the, I guess, case gauge portion. So anyway, they're, like I said, pretty cheap, about $6. If you bought the Lee kit, you'll get the cutter itself, as well as I think you get this little drill attachment, which is really cool. They do have a manual one that you can use by hand, but since you already have this, especially if you bought the press, that's the way I would go. It's really quick, and it's actually a really decent trimmer and very consistent from what I found for the price. I think all for $10 or under, you can trim your cases with this. It does not chamfer and deburr your brass, unfortunately, and actually any of these options I have here do not do that, so you'll have to do that separately, which is really unfortunate. There are options that allow you to chamfer and deburr at the same time, which is something I'm looking to upgrade in the future, especially for my 223, my bulk stuff. So anyway, also to mention, if you did buy the Lee press kit or whatever, it does come with this little chamfer deburr tool. So this is what theirs looks like, and this is what mine looks like. See the size difference? Anyway. Yeah, I had to bring a bad joke into it. Anyway, I would actually just take that and toss it away because it will cramp your hands after all of but 2 cases. It does work. It's free, but just get one of the other. So next up we have I think it's the Lee Quick Trim. Yeah. So this is the Lee Quick Trim and the Quick Trim die. These are also caliber specific, and I'm just making sure that I'm in frame. And I'll zoom in for you just a little bit so you can see. But these are caliber specific as well. You have to buy these dies. They are a bit more expensive than the cutter set. I think the dies are about $8 to $10 or so. So they're still not much. Again, the Lee, if you bought the Lee Challenger press kit, it also comes with this cutter. They do have an upgraded version that also chamfers and deburrs. And this one, as you could tell, it's probably not too hard to see. There you go. It's just flat, so it doesn't chamfer and deburr the case at the same time, but they do have a deluxe, I think is what they call it, version of this. I think it's about $20 to get this cutter assembly for the deluxe. Some kits include the deluxe, which is really nice. Mine didn't, but that might be a worthy upgrade. And how you use this is just by putting it in your press. So if you're limited on space, or you just want to limit the amount of things you have, this is a great option to go. I've heard some people have hit or miss results, but I've actually had fantastic results with this, and I actually quite like it. I only have 2 calibers, so same for the cutter assembly as well. I only have it in certain calibers, so this one I only have for 30-30 and 6.5 Creedmoor. I'll show you the 30-30, and then the other one I have for 223. But anyway, I'll move that aside, and probably the most common and more expensive, but not the most expensive option. Let me just do some shuffling here. Is something like the RCBS Trim Pro II is the one I have. But they're all very similar. Lyman makes one, Hornady makes one, pretty much all the major manufacturers make one, Forster makes one too. I've only used this one, and I got this one because it has these jaws here, which a lot of the others aren't universal, so you need to use shell holders, which is fine. But I kind of like the ability just to open these jaws and not have to deal with shell holders. There is a caveat to that, and when you're using 223 brass, the really small brass, it tends to, when you put it in the jaws, it tends to flick out if it's not kind of sitting almost center. So you have to kind of set it in and move it a little bit to set it. With the bigger brass, it doesn't have that problem. But anyway, I'm going to show you how to set up this one as well. These run for about $120. I think you can get the Hornady and Lyman for around 80 or 90 bucks. So those are a bit cheaper. This one's also pretty accurate. I've gotten great results with it too. However, I will say it doesn't cut as square. And that's probably due to these jaws and the fact that it might sit off a little bit. So what I like to do is rotate it. I'll trim it, rotate it, and trim it. But anyways, I'll show you that. The only thing you must have, and if you buy usually a kit version of it, you have to have these pilots. And this one's really small. So let me get like the 45 caliber to show you. See if it's in focus. And since I don't have 45 caliber, I'll show you how the 223, the smaller one, works, or 22 caliber. And all it does is just sit in there, and it just holds it square, so it can cut it square. But if you don't have the appropriate pilots, you will need to buy those separately. They're really cheap, $4, $5, $6 or something. So it's not that big of a deal, and it does include, mine included, all of these, which isn't bad. So it kind of gets you going. I think the only one I had to buy was a 2.6 caliber for Creedmoor, but you get most of the ones that you need. So I will go ahead and show you how to use each and every one of these. I'll probably just start from cheapest to most expensive. So I'll start with the Lee cutter, the one you chuck in a drill. So I'm going to get that set up, and I'll see you in a second. So now we're going to set up the Lee cutter and case gauge assembly. It's really easy. Apparently this is adjustable as well. I haven't done it that way. I've always just tightened this down all the way to the end of the cutter. If you can kind of see there, it's a little bit, it's threaded on the inside. So you're just going to need these pieces here. Again, you can also use the hand version if you're not going to use the drill chuck piece. But I'm going to show you how to put this together. It's dead simple. All you do is just take the cutter and you take this case gauge and you just thread it in. And you start tightening it down. Then take some channel locks or something and just tighten it all the way till it touches. You may not be able to see it, but it's touching flush with the cutter. It won't go down any further. So that's that for the assembly. So it's set. Again, I think this is adjustable if you back it in or out, but I always just leave it as is. So next thing I'm going to do is the chuck is threaded as well as this shell holder piece. So you're just going to thread that in. Oops. And how this works is really easy as well. It acts like a shell holder, like I mentioned. You just tighten this down. It's a little hard without it being held, but you just tighten it down and then release it just like so. So I may not have a great view of this since I'm going to show you how it cuts, but let's just go ahead and take the chuck piece and put it in our drill like that. And then we're going to slide in our piece of brass. Make sure I'm going the right way this time. I am. All right. So all we do is just slide the cutter over or inside the case and then just spin it until it spins freely, and that's really it. Go and switch to top view. Zoom out just a little. Actually, I don't know, I'll get back in. I don't know if you'll be able to see that, but there you go. So it's a freshly cut case. And I could feel that the edges will need deburred as well, but that's all there is to that, really. So you just take each piece and you set your brass inside the shell holder, you tighten it down, and then ease in this cutter until it's really smooth, and you'll feel it. It's very tactile feeling. It'll become real slick when it's not cutting anymore. And that's all there is to it. You just do that for every single one of your cases. And while you're at it, you can also chuck in the 832 thread to chamfer or deburr tool, or if you had one of those fancy stations, you could use that as well. But if you watched my swaging, or well, pocket reamings, pocket swaging video, I showed you how to use this before, and I'll have a card for that, so you can check that out if you haven't already. But you can just chuck this in your drill and then start going at that process. So each one anyway, or you can do it by hand. So that's it for that. That's really, again, really simple. So the next thing I'm going to show you is the quick trim with the press. So I'll get that set up as well, and I'll see you in just a sec. So now onto the Lee quick trim. So what you're going to want to need is the quick trim die itself. These are sold separately. They're around $8 or $10 or so. Again, they're caliber specific. You're going to need the quick trim itself, a shell holder, which is a standard shell holder. So there's no specialty shell holder for these, just the one you already have. If you bought it with, I think the quick trim also comes with this little plastic shroud that goes over your press, so you don't get a bunch of brass shavings in your press. So it's pretty cool. You're going to need your chamfer deburr tool, calipers, and ideally you're going to want to grab out your hand loading book. And the reason for that is we want to make sure that we're going to trim within SAMI spec. So in my 3030 case, it's from 2.019 all the way to 2.039. And you can check any published data, whether it's online, say from Hodgdon website, or a Lyman manual, Hornady manual, etc. One thing I like about this Lyman manual is that it covers a multiple load of calipers and bullets and powders and all that stuff. So it's not specific to one given thing. So it's a very versatile book. So I'd highly recommend picking this one up. Just always make sure that you're checking a reliable source or official source for all of your loading data, so you can start from there. So just a word of warning there. The other thing, grab some grease if you have any, because it helps with this quick trim since it's rubbing metal on metal. I find it gets kind of marred up after a little while. It gets a little sticky, so that just helps smoothen things up a little bit. So the first thing we're going to want to do is just already have our press ready to go. In my case, I already have the bushing in, but we're just going to snap the shell holder in like so. Then we're going to slide this plastic shroud over the top of the shell holder, and that's all there is to that. So in this case too, one thing I want to mention also, I forgot, is you don't have to go by the trim 2 length that they used, but I typically do. So right here they say a trim 2 length 2.028. That's just a good starting ground. If anybody knows why they do that, let me know, because I'm actually curious. I have no idea why they choose specific lengths. It seems like just because that's a middle of the ground, but that's what we'll be trying to aim for. So I'm just going to slide this big book aside, taking up a bunch of my space. Grab the cases as well. So we're just going to take the die out of its little plastic casing here. Grab that, move that aside as well. And one handy thing you'll notice with these Lee dies is they include in the instructions here the trim 2 lengths, so it includes the SAMI specs within it. So in this case, 2.019 to 2.039. So that's really nice to have. It's just a quick reference. So I like to keep that in with that little plastic protector. The next thing you're going to want to do is take the thumb screw and the lock ring, should I say. I always forget what these are called. The lock ring, and run it all the way up to it tops out in the die. So just like that. Then what we'll do is go ahead and thread that all the way down into the press. No specific setting here, just bottoming it out. Bottoming it out. There we go, just get a good thumb tighten. So, I think I already mentioned, but with this one, they have one that also chamfers and deburrs the case as well, which is really nice to have. They call that the deluxe, but in my case, I don't have that, so I'm grabbing my chamfer and deburr tool. So the next thing we'll do is just grab one of the cases and measure it and see where we're at. So I want to go for their 2.028, I think, or at least close to. So this one says 2.038. What do you know? 3.8 as well. 3.7. So all pretty close, but we'll go ahead and trim those. Actually, sorry, I'm gonna switch back to the press. So about that grease. So this is just some basically Tetragun standard grease you might use for like an AR or something. Really good stuff. So I just put a little bit, just a dollop of it, just a little dab of it, and just rub it all over the all over the trim die itself. So anyway, all you do is just slide that into the die and you're good to go there. You may want to keep your grease aside because you may have to continually do it if you're doing a big batch. So the next thing you do is raise the ram and slide in your shovel holder. One thing I actually do want to note, I am going to switch back to top view, is you want to make sure that this trim die is clockwise. So there's a little clicking adjustment on here, and that's how you adjust the trim length from whichever specific caliber you're using. So you want to make sure that's counterclockwise all the way. At least I'm pretty sure. Let me make sure that's correct. Yeah. So you want to adjust that counterclockwise all the way till it can't go anymore. And what that's doing is backing the quick trim higher. So it's backing it basically to the 2.039 setting, or at least it should be. I found this thing can be hit or miss, so we'll see. So you just raise your cartridge or your case all the way, and I like to put a little bit of pressure on the ram, and you just give this quick trim a few spins, 8-10 spins or so. In this case, it's pretty smooth, so I'm not hearing or feeling anything, and that's a good indicator as well. And we'll see what we got here. So these were all pretty dead on, 2.03839. So as you see that trim down to, for whatever reason, 2.035, which is okay. So in that case, I'm going to go down probably 7 or so clicks. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And see what that gets us. And each click, if I didn't already mention, is roughly 1,000th of adjustment. Oh yeah, I can really feel that one this time. I really like to spin it overboard, to be honest, just to make sure I'm getting a good trim. Yeah, in that case I overshot, and maybe it was my horrible math that I'm not good at, but we are about 2.025 is what I'm reading. So in this case, I can go counterclockwise, 3 clicks or so, and see if that gets us 2.8-ish. Some people have had mixed results with this setup. I've actually found once I get it dialed in, and on days when I can do math in my head, I can actually get it pretty consistent. Let me go ahead and switch the top view for you. Trying to get these cases sometimes to balance this, or get on my calipers is rough. 2.029, so we might go down 1 click, but for this case, this demonstration, you probably understand what's going on. It's pretty straightforward. You just keep clicking and adjusting, and if you can do math in your head, unlike me, you can probably get it dead on pretty quickly. So one thing when you're chamfering and deburring cases is you don't want to go overboard too much. There's no specific amount of turns or twists that you got to do, but I just basically, for deburring, which is this tool, which is on the outside, I just go until I feel that it's smooth, and you'll feel a nice, really rough edge on here, but so about like that. And for chamfering, in this case, this is the VLD, so it's the long, skinny type of a chamfer tool, which isn't really meant for these style bullets that I put in the 3030s case, but you probably want to go give it 2 or 3 turns, few turns. It really just depends. You don't want to overdo it. You don't want to remove too much material. And I'll try to show you, but I highly doubt it's going to show well in camera at all. But you just want a nice little edge in there. So you'll see a little bit of kind of I don't know if I like a ramp. I don't know how to describe it, but just a nice chamfer. And you should be able to visibly see it pretty well. Another way to check, and this would be unfortunate, but when you go to seat bullets, if you see that copper is being scratched off your bullets, that means you didn't chamfer enough. So you don't want to overdo it. Again, you don't want to underdo it. With these bullets, I wouldn't care so much because I use cheap bullets for my 30-30, but for your expensive stuff, that really sucks to be scratching up all your bullets. So the next thing that we'll do is set up probably the most common one, which is the RCBS Trim Pro II. So yeah, that's all there is for this one, and we'll move on to next. Last but not least is the RCBS Trim Pro II. So what we'll do first is go ahead and install the handle, and what this does is actuate or open and close the jaws for the quick release here. So you want to grab your retaining pin as well as the handle, and you'll see there's holes here as well as holes that line up on the actual trimmer itself. And you just want to align all of that up. Sometimes you have to hold it a little bit vertical, and you'll just let it go like so. Next thing you'll want to have is your pilot. In my case, I'm using the 22 caliber pilot since I'm trimming for 223. And all this does is slide inside the cutter head, and there's a retaining screw here that you want to make sure is already loose, and more than likely it probably is. You just want to, I like to put pressure on the pilot against the cutter head to make sure it's square, but then you want to take an Allen key. I don't know what size it is, unfortunately, but just take an Allen key and tighten that down just a little bit, nothing too crazy. So now our pilot's installed. What we'll do next is take one of our cases and just measure it with our calipers and see where we're at here. So in my case, I'm at 1.7645. So basically, I like to trim for 1.750 when I'm trimming for my 223 brass. So what we'll do is go ahead and push down on our handle and then slide our brass in while also pushing the pilot in. I know that sounds like a lot, but or cutter head assembly, but it's a little tricky. So push the handle down, move the cutter head away, and then while I still have pressure on the handle, I just slide the cutter head against that. And what that does is make sure everything's aligned and squared up as best it possibly can be. So now that our case is in there, what we'll need to do is adjust the two settings here. Oh, and one thing I also do want to mention before I forget is I like to use the same grease on the cutter assembly a little bit. We could just put that in the front there. Usually I do that before then, but totally forgot to mention that. And what that does is prevent corrosion as well as keeps it lubed up nice for us. So, but anyway, you'll see that there's two adjustments here. There's the micrometer adjustment, and then there's the coarse adjustment. So what we're going to want to do is make sure those two set screws are loose. And great thing is it uses the same Allen key as before. So we'll just back those out a little bit. I'm going to find a reference point on my micrometer here, but what we'll want to do is adjust this micrometer forwards, so away from us, one full revolution. And what that's doing is giving us room to play to adjust this micrometer forwards and back as we need to when we go to adjust our settings. So let me switch to the other view for you. So I'm just going to hold against the hold the knurled or the rough adjustment, and then adjust that micrometer one full turn. It might be stuck on there. There we go. So one full turn. About like that. And so the next thing we'll do is go ahead and I like to pull on the adjustment a little bit just to make sure it's flush against the cutter or the trimmer. And then we'll just tighten down the rough adjustment there just a little bit. So now our rough adjustment's set, but our micrometer, as you see there, is still free. So since we measured 6.5-ish, what I want to do is adjust this back towards me about 15 thousandths. So that will get us in 1.750 roughly, if I did my math correctly this time. So all we do is just take our micrometer adjustment and do that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and of course the big hash marks are 5. So 10 and 15. And then go ahead and switch back to that top view. Usually, in my case, the set screw is underneath somewhere where it's hard to reach every time you go to do the initial adjustment there, but you're going to want to tighten down your micrometer adjustment also while holding it like that. And you might notice a gap, and this one's actually pretty significant right there. And you'll see that everything's adjusted, and that's how far out our case is. You don't always notice that. It's not really indicative of anything, but it's nice, just a nice confirmation. Now I'm going to try the best I can to hold on to all this, since I usually have this clamped down to the edge of my bench, but typically it's going to be a lot more solid than this. But we'll go ahead and trim, and we'll, just like the other trimmers, we'll trim until it feels smooth. And I'll show you a nifty little trick after it smoothens out. Move that out of the way. This one's gonna have a long way to go. Couldn't have one that was 2/1000ths or anything. About right there, and I got a some nice bling, some reloader bling there. Anyway, so the trick that I was going to mention is I like to push down on the handle. So push down on the handle and then give the case about a half a turn. And what this does is square it up, because some people have reported that this trimmer in particular doesn't cut square. And I think that's due to these quick releasing jaws. So what I do, oh, it's stuck. Oh, okay, there we go. What I do is just put pressure on the handle, half a turn, same thing, push the cutter in, and then just give it a few more turns. Basically until you don't hear it or feel the resistance anymore. There we go. Let's give this a measure and see where we're at. In my case, I went a little generous with the adjustment. Sometimes I get it dead on, and sometimes I don't, but in this case, we know our micrometer adjustment needs to go back a bit, so it would go, we'd just adjust it 0.003 more, but once you have this set to your setting for the particular case, it's usually pretty accurate from there on out. Now, unfortunately, every time you change calibers, so if I went to my 30-30 or 6.5 Creedmoor, I would have to do all those steps all over again and play with a piece of brass. Now, I did go a bit crazy by adjusting full 0.15. Usually I knock it back a couple just for instances like that. In this case, I don't care for this brass, but if it were my precision stuff, personally, that would drive me crazy. But anyway, that's all there is to it. One thing I will mention, if I haven't already, is for 223 or bulk brass especially, you might want to look into some of the other trimmers like the World's Finest trimmer or the Giro or Gerard, I don't know, the tri-way trimmer. And those can truck into your drill or into a motor. And those chamfer and deburr all at the same time, as well as trim. And the other thing about those two is most of those measure off the shoulder instead of measuring off the base to the top of the case. And what that means is that measuring from the shoulder when you're trimming a brass is a lot more consistent and accurate than from the base, like all the other trimmers we've pretty much been using. So anyway, if you guys are interested in seeing that, just let me know, and maybe, I don't have one, but maybe I'll get one and show you in the future if you'd be interested. But yeah, if you're only doing 223 or something bulk, I would recommend going that route. Those are around $100. But anyway, that's all there is for trimming. Our next video will be tumbling brass and getting everything all cleaned. And I'll show you that process. So until then, I'll see you in the next one.